Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik, a teacher with LSAT Demon. With me today is Leslie, who is our personal statement editor, law school admissions guru. You've worked with many students putting together admissions and their application components. Welcome, Leslie. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Erik. And yes, I love working with students on their personal statements. And I'm very excited about the admissions course that is so close to so close to coming. It's really going to help everyone just know what to do every step of the way. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have been hard at work on that for quite some time. So keep an eye out, dear listener, for the LSAT Demon Law School admissions course. If you, like many of us going in, know nothing about the confusing and opaque process of law school applications, we're trying to help out with that. All right, let's get into today's topic, GPA addendums. We get lots of emails about GPA addendums, many listeners who wish their GPA was higher than it actually was. I count myself among those people. And lots of people who see or hear about the possibility of writing a GPA addendum to address why it is that your GPA was lower than you think it should have been. I will say up front, a dangerous thing to do. There are some pitfalls to the GPA addendum and a question of whether you should write one in the first place. So maybe, Leslie, give me your gut check, just your high-level take on GPA addendums generally. Should we be looking to write them? Should we try to avoid them? Like, what's the first thing that we should know about GPA addendums?
Yeah, so it is a tough one. And I have helped a lot of people write a GPA addendum. You know, we talked about it. We decided, okay, a short GPA addendum. Sure, let's do this. But with that said, I am just noticing such a pattern of it being harder and harder and harder to justify writing one. There's just always a better way to reframe it. And I just have to tell you some of the feedback that I've gotten that's like getting back to me from admissions officers. I recently had two students that had very similar experiences, both applied last cycle without our help, and they're back this cycle applying again. And both of them had called their top choices to ask them, what can I do better? And which is great that they took that initiative. However, in both responses, and this is what really got me, is that both admissions officers pulled up their files and just zeroed in on their GPA addendum, like as though that was the thing that was going to make a difference. And so then, they're coming to me saying, oh, I really need to write a really awesome GPA addendum. They've written this new draft that's like a page long. I'm just like, no, they didn't like your first GPA addendum. Obviously there was nothing in there that grabbed them. We're not going to probably we might do a better job of that, but that's not any better. What you need to do is just totally reframe it. I think what those admissions officers meant to say was, your GPA was kind of low. You didn't convince me in the rest of your application that you've, I don't know, had enough of a difference since then, that you've, that you've changed enough since then, perhaps. So that's some of the feedback that we're getting from admissions officers is just like, oh, zeroing in on the GPA, but then saying it to the student in a way that makes them think, oh, if I just write this great GPA addendum, that's going to make the difference. So
do you think those admissions officers might have been saying, you shouldn't have written this? Your application would have been stronger without this?
I think that subconsciously, yes, whether that was what they were thinking or not, that like if that GPA addendum hadn't have been there, those admissions officers would have then just been considering more about, okay, well, let's talk to the student. Maybe, I don't know, they would have, I think, said something else, right? So yeah, obviously, maybe this isn't obvious, but for us at LSAT Demon, I would say, the best way to address a low GPA, to write your GPA addendum, is instead of doing that, just get a great LSAT score. Show them that you can do the work. Show them that you've, it screams louder than your GPA, and it definitely screams louder than your GPA addendum. So that would be the best way to go about.
Sure.
quotation marks, writing a GPA addendum.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, let's get into some of the common reasons why I see people suggest a GPA addendum or ask, should I write this GPA addendum? And get into some of these specific and common topics and discuss maybe pitfalls, potential avenues for writing a GPA addendum, or whether we should just not bother. One that is common, which actually came up in multiple listener emails this past week, is simply, hey, I was young when I started school. I was not a great student for whatever reason my first couple years of college. I take full responsibility for that. I just didn't have my stuff together, but I improved. Something clicked for me academically, or I took some time off from school and I came back when I was older. And then when I was actually ready for school and more responsible, I got straight A's. My GPA was great. But my GPA for when I was younger or less responsible, not good. So is there anything to writing a GPA that highlights an upward trajectory, which basically just acknowledges, yeah, I was a bad student back then, I'm not anymore?
so this is for sure one of the most common, I would say, kind of types of GPA addendum. Yeah, that people want to write, where they're just like, oh, I wish my GPA was, had been better the whole time. You know, I'm gonna again just say, I think just not doing it is the answer, because no matter what you write, you're then pulling them into some, like it sounds like you have to say something like, oh, I wasn't mature enough, or you
Mm,
have to say something where you're kind of digging yourself into a hole. And I get it that you're doing that because you want to then show how you've grown, but you're still digging yourself into a hole, and that's like gonna be, it's just, now that's a component of your application that's like just like the LSAT is,
yeah,
and that's like you're giving them the opportunity to them when they pull up your file, they're zeroing in on that instead of saying like, oh well, Perils actually, okay, maybe I can see that it's up. I don't know, they'll just come to some other conclusion where they're giving you more thought instead of this like thing that you kind of regret from your past. Like, don't pull them into that. Getting
yeah,
another like admissions officer feedback, I always love to go back to. So I told about the stories. Another one that I've heard recently from an admissions officer is just this. It's obviously different individual to individual, but this guy was just talking about what a waste of time addenda are, just in general. He feels that his time is being wasted, if he's like, if he has to read an addenda, because it's pulling him out of this. He wants to get in on what you're saying about in your personal statement, and then and in as far as what he's reading, and then of course the LSAT, and but it's
yeah,
pulling him away from that, and again, like now he has to go into this hole that you've dug for yourself. So
totally.
I would say, yeah, just don't do it.
That is a very important consideration. I'm glad you brought that up. Considering the admissions officer's time, knowing that they are reading thousands of these. So your half-page GPA addendum might not seem like much when you're just considering your own application. But when it's the 10th one that this person has read before lunch and they have thousands more applications to get through, you start to see how all of those GPA addendums could become quite tedious and annoying for admissions officers to get through.
They
And yeah,
do all
just
sound
yeah,
very similar too. I mean, a lot of the time.
yeah,
And like, just to be like the devil's advocate on the other side of it, I for sure hear admissions officers also saying, oh, we want to hear everything. Write us a 10-page GPA. Like where
sure,
they're wanting you to write more and more and more about yourself. When they say that, I just have to be cynical and think like, again, like don't fall into a trap. Like, don't give away all of this. It's like the same, I guess, thing I already said, but just, yeah, like don't fall into this trap of, yes, I'll write all of this, and now like all my deep dark secrets. That's not the right approach to take. Be very judicial in what you're choosing to include. So don't just keep going back to it. Just don't write a GPA addendum, probably.
Yeah, particularly not one where you acknowledge, hey, I haven't always been a very good student, and the law
Yeah.
schools are looking for good students.
Yeah. Inevitably, these like start out like, oh, I got a lower grade in that one class, but that was just because I was late all the time. I made it. I made up for it later. Like that was like when I heard just a few weeks ago. It's like
Yeah,
now they know that you used to be late to class all the time. Like why are you telling them that?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on. Maybe another thing that we hear about a lot is not stories of, oh, I was a bad student, but I had a bad semester because of some thing that was out of my control. A family emergency, an ailing family member who I had to look after during this semester, and there was just so much responsibility. Or I myself got very sick or was suffering from various things, and I just had this one aberrant semester where, because of stuff that was out of my control, my grades took a dive. Anything to that where you can actually, anyone looking at the transcript would see, oh, this one semester looks like it doesn't fit in, and you have a reason to explain that. What do you think about that?
Sure. I mean, that is a tricky one. That is one where in the past I have worked with people to write a short addendum about that type of thing. But the more and more that I just work on more of them and think about it, there usually is still a better way to reframe it. For one, it may not be necessary to mention. If it brought your grades down a little bit, they were back up the next semester, sure, the officer looking at it, the admissions officer looking at it is already going to be, depending on how thoroughly they're looking at your file, may see that, oh, and like maybe a tiny bit curious, but his attention isn't not going to land on it in the way that it is if you then make a big deal out of it.
Mm.
Depending on what it is that's going on. Like a couple examples I can think of from recently. I had a student who his mother died like during college, and I think it even like delayed his graduation. So I was talking to him more about it and found out that, oh, actually, like there was more to the story. Like he had grown up like pretty poor. His mom had been like a single mom to him and his brother, and he was the first in the family to graduate from college. And it's like, you know what, this is a diversity statement or lived experience, or there's kind of different ways to kind of think about that. But so in that case, it was like, okay, something was going on there, and it was actually like substantial enough to reframe it, not even talk about the GPA,
Yeah.
just in a I never know what to call them anymore, but the lived experience diversity statement. Schools call them all kinds of different things, but it's not the personal statement. It's your chance to show more about some of these. Again, going back to diversity, sometimes it's about that, but something that that may need to be said, but that doesn't fit in the personal statement.
Yeah.
So in that case, it was like instead of making it about the GPA, show them, because those prompts are often asking like, ask about a challenge that you overcame. What a perfect opportunity to like make the lead be, I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. Somewhere in there mentioning, yes, his mother died while he was being the first, like navigating college for the first time in his family. Anyone, reading that could certainly put two and two together. He doesn't need to make it about his GPA. Like he can make it about this new, like reframing it about like that part of his life. So that's an example that comes to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You found a way to tell a compelling story and to actually add something to the application that played up this person's strengths rather than dwell on something that didn't look so good as a part of their application.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you can tell your story in such better ways than a GPA addendum. I mean, we're like not even thinking about GPAs anymore, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I like that. Related topic, which is maybe similar to this one, but even beyond like one bad semester, what about one bad grade? Like something happened, maybe it was like a logistical snafu, like I don't know, you somehow somehow got the date of the final wrong, and you, after being a perfect student all through this one class, somehow you screwed up the calendar input for the final, and you didn't show up to the final even though you had it in your calendar just for the wrong time, and you got a D in the class because of this one mistake. And this is every other class you've ever had was an A, except for this one D that wasn't because you were a bad student, because you made one logistical error. Is that worth a GPA addendum?
So, man, again, that is tough. That is really tough. If I'm looking at your file and I'm seeing that you got, mostly or all A's other than that, it's going to be obvious that that's not the usual. So why not just leave it at that? Sure, you could think, and again, this is definitely, in the past, sure, yes, I have worked with students this way. There may be students that convince me in the future, but I'm just going to tell you that it's going to be much harder to convince me because the more and more that I think about these situations, I mean, okay, so let's say you write that very short GPA addendum about that. Somewhere in, you're having to admit something that you did wrong, that it's not your usual. We get that. But if you did that, as a lawyer for your client, missed the court date or something, that is that's not okay. No, you can't get, you don't get another chance at that A. I don't know, maybe you can somehow file something and get another chance. I don't know. But the point is, that's not something that's going to ever be okay in the future. So don't tell them that you did that, and don't, it's going to be kind of hard to, I think, reframe it that way. Some schools do, be sure to, if you did actually we're on academic probation, some schools are going to ask you to disclose that. Of course, always read the school instructions carefully. There may even be some out there that are specifically asking to explain a failed grade or something like that. So, those kinds of things, yes, you do need to write, but, don't write that and a GPA addendum.
Yeah.
It's that one. I think just again, I'm sorry that you have this one terrible grade, but I think it's just going to reflect better on you if they are kind of left wondering, well, I wonder what happened with that one class. Oh, well, I guess they're usually a grade 8 student, is what we want. That's what we're hoping that they're thinking. If they really need to find out from you, maybe they can follow up and ask you, hey, we need to get this explained. I don't know. I'm just, but why volunteer that information?
The worst. Yeah. If that's the really what happens and you tell them nothing about it, the worst they can think is, looks like they had one bad class.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's you don't need to tell them in a separate addendum more about it. I just no no.
It sounds like what we're coming back to is play to your strengths. Don't remind schools of the negative or of the weaker part of your application. Don't offer up information about yourself that makes you look irresponsible or like a bad student. Just don't overshare, and probably don't write a GPA addendum. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely fair. Draw their attention somewhere else. Play up every other part of your application in positive ways. Make sure that, if you're getting an awesome LSAT score, they're not going to pull up your file and zero in on your GPA addendum. They're going to be thinking about other things. So yeah, think about how you're framing your story. I love, Nathan loves to say, put your best foot forward. And I love coming back to that. Just be your best you. So yeah.
Totally. Great. Well, I think that just about does it. Thank you, Leslie, for coming on.
Thank you so much, Erik.
Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.